Welcome back to Studio Sessions at DAAP. I'm your host, Delfina Lasache. In today's episode, we're diving into a field of landscape architecture. We have two special guests today.
I'm Rachel Carr.
And I'm Gabrielle Ragusa.
They're students in the Master of Landscape Architecture, and they're here to break down what the field is all about, how it impacts our cities and communities, and what it's like to study in DAAP. So, grab your sketchbook, coffee, or whatever gets you in the zone, and let's jump into today's session. So, can you introduce yourself and share what brought you to study landscape architecture at DAAP?
Sure. I didn't study design in my previous studies. I did a political science undergrad and then really just worked in agriculture and different jobs in community organizing. And in that space, I got really interested in entering a new profession where I'd have a bit more of a specific craft. I think farming and agriculture is one where you see like people can develop that through practice. And I think I enjoyed developing that, but I wanted a more kind of design process to learn and also kind of specific measuring, designing tools that comes with landscape architecture, and found the program at UC and just dove in.
How you got it?
Beautiful. I actually studied sustainable agriculture first and not native to Cincinnati, but I guess maybe was looking for a reason to come back because ultimately, I think sort of in the same way, studying sustainable agriculture opens you up to so many different disciplines, whether it's being a political advocate or being hands literally in the dirt or working with farmers or working with local food systems. But none of that captures the way in which design can invoke an emotional response. And I think sustainable agriculture and just interactions with nature in general is an inherently emotional process. And so I think the beauty of the discipline of landscape architecture is that it is that intersection of environmental science and understanding topography and weather and your social climate and aesthetic and design and emotion. And so I was happy to come back to UC or to the Cincinnati area because this program is also unique in that it's only 2 years versus 3. So that was definitely major impetus, I would say, as well.
So tell me, talking about your field, are you working on which topic are you researching right now? What are you focused on? Like, if you can tell me about that.
You're capstoning.
I am capstoning.
Mhm.
So the Masters of Landscape Architecture program is a little different than the other master's programs at DAAP. And we have a capstone to finish the course or to finish the program, while others have theses. And our capstone studio is focused on looking at the future of Cincinnati and where is planning and landscape architecture going in the future. It's a collaborative studio with planners and landscape architects. And the area that I'm looking at for cities is what's in the streetscape. So at your eye level, what's on the street, what kind of street furniture, like signs, benches, that kind of thing are there, and what needs to be there in the future to make our cities more livable.
Directly impacting basically the user experience of existing in an urban setting.
Yeah. And really, like, there are planners who are looking at, like, what should streets be? Like, how does transportation work? But, like, how does your body and you, like, experience mobility on the street?
Right.
And I think that's what landscape architecture does. It's kind of different than planning, where it's like, what is it like for you?
Mm-hmm. What does it feel like?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my favorite part. I'm not capstoning yet.
No, because you're first year.
Exactly. But we're working on a variety of different scales, I would say, thus far. And this semester, our studio is focused on Ulsan metropolitan city in South Korea. And so I would say it's unique in that usually we're working on a block or a multi-block scale, which is a relatively small scale, especially compared to planners. And in this case, we're looking at a whole city. But it's highlighting one of my favorite topics, which is circular economies, circular systems, using one tree's output, for example, as input for another.
I was just going to ask you guys, like, how is your field of study like related to your interests? And what I can hear about your research topics is like it motivates you. It's like I just love landscape. So
It does feel like the right.
yeah. How has being at DAAP influenced your perspective as a landscape architecture student?
Being at DAAP has been interesting because it is up to this point so interdisciplinary, and our program is relatively small, especially compared to the other programs in the School of Planning and in DAAP at large. But it's certainly underscored how much cooperation and collaboration is going to go into being a professional in this field, whether it's working with architects or civil engineers or horticulturalists or, planners from the city, or even community development corporations as well. It's hugely collaborative. And I think that the setting at DAAP embodies that in a really nice way. So, and it's great to see the work that other disciplines are doing as well. I'm constantly blown away by what the planners are working on and what the architects are working on. We don't work directly with many of the design students or like fashion students or graphic students, but it's all related.
Well, you're taking a class currently. Well, you just finished it. How are you? No, I cannot pronounce it.
The foundry class, the sculpture foundry, yeah. Yeah, sculpting and making things out of metal is not something I would have ever anticipated from my time in graduate school, but it was a really lovely, hands-on, expressive outlet that counted as an elective. So
Yeah.
I'm a happy camper.
I think it honestly was a little different than I expected being in DAAP. So DAAP has a reputation for being like very kind of like art school. Or at least that's the reputation I had. And so once I got started in the program and found that it was so many other disciplines like planning and architecture and design, I was like, oh, there's a lot more going on. And really just being in the school of planning specifically has meant that we've interacted a lot with the planning students. And I would say I've been most influenced by the planning professors and planning students. And they're really just a very scholarly bunch.
Technical.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So to finish the episode, I want you guys to give an advice to any student that is thinking about getting a master's here at UC. So if you have one, you can share it now.
I think my advice for a student looking at landscape architecture generally is to kind of see if you can understand how landscape architecture is a discipline, but also a practice. And so you might be interested in like gardens and public space and urban agriculture. And that's actually more like the discipline of landscape architecture. They might look at those kinds of things, but how a landscape architect designs space is really more kind of what you were describing in this studio, looking at space in this general way. Like, what are the opportunities? What are the like way we can imagine the future in space? Like, that's kind of how landscape architecture thinks. So I would just say, like, be aware that there are kind of two sides of landscape architecture, and you don't need to be like totally interested in both.
Right.
But I would say just kind of like be open to both and kind of look at that in different programs. I think we do a pretty good job of like doing that as a discipline and a practice, like a method and a study. So just get to know what you're interested in so you can ask students like us and at other schools how they view that.
That's a really good point. Yeah, because a lot of the topics that we are involved in or that would be our responsibility in a workplace aren't necessarily directly related to the workflow that we would go through to answer those questions or to solve those problems. And so I guess my advice for an incoming or prospective Masters of Landscape Architecture student would be, if you don't have experience, especially with certain softwares in advance, to get to a point where you feel comfortable enough navigating, because you jump from program to program as you move from start to finish through a plan. And by that, I just mean like AutoCAD, and then something to make it 3D, and then something to make it pretty like Photoshop. There's a lot of time spent digitally so that you can visualize what your ideas are and communicate those with people that aren't in your field, and or people working in adjacent fields too. So I would say understanding your like graphic style, your visual style, and your workflow in advance would be a major benefit.
Well, thank you guys for joining me in the studio sessions, and for everyone you guys hearing this, wait for the next episode next week.